Hi, gang. Here's your Tuesday poll question at Smerconish.com. Should Congress mandate Medicaid to cover weight loss medications like GLP1's? Should Congress mandate that Medicaid, meaning on a state basis, cover weight loss meds like GLP1's? I'll tell you why I'm asking that question in just a moment. Thank you to my friends at Parx Casino. Wow, what an ending last night. Did I stay up till 2:50 a.m. Eastern time to watch it? No, I did not. I'll talk about that on radio today because I was sort of inching into it, like maybe it's just going to be within the next inning. Should I stay up? And then when I woke up, I'm like, ooh, I'm glad I didn't try and tough it out. Parx Casino, the number one casino in Pennsylvania. It's my casino of choice. They've got it all: action, entertainment, the Excite Center, sing-along brunches, Latin dance nights, a lot of mingling opportunities, country line dancing, comedy night, happy hour in the Liberty Bell Beer Garden. And then check this out: every Sunday, 12 noon, and every Monday at 6 p.m. So noon on Sunday, 6 p.m. on Monday, the BetParx Sportsbook serves up the ultimate fan experience: dollar hot dogs, $3 Miller Lights, and $5 Peronis, plus wall-to-wall action on the 150-foot giant sportsbook screens. Headliners coming in: Straight No Chaser, comedian Kem Jung, the Led Zeppelin tribute, which is called Get the Lead Out. I've seen it. It's fabulous. Parx Casino, this is how you win. You got to be 21. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Yesterday, I was so thrilled and just a wee bit disappointed in the poll result because we were at 39,406. Huge vote for a Monday. Really, really great. A little bit disappointed because I thought, ooh, couldn't we have broken 40,000? Who has the better chance to be elected president as between Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris? A blowout. 95.68% said it's Governor Newsom. 4.32% said it's Vice President Harris. Why would I ask the question? Well, Robert Costa from CBS News was here yesterday. It was to Costa that Gavin Newsom said he'd be lying if he didn't say that he was interested in running in 2028, and he'll have more to say after the 2026 midterm elections. And Kamala Harris pretty much said the same thing to the BBC. So they're both interested. She's still on the book tour. I mean, if she were to say she's disinterested, I imagine that book tour would end. This on the heels of the New York Times analysis saying that moderates fare best in general elections. And the question becomes one of which of the two of them could you say is more moderate? I think it's very difficult, but I think that tonally, and I know that I noticed that he's trying to do it through his sort of coarsening language. Not that I'm some prude, but every time it seems that I'm seeing a film clip of Gavin Newsom on somebody else's podcast, he's dropping the F-bomb. I think that's largely for effect. So I don't see much difference ideologically between the two of them, but I think that he can try and portray himself as being more centrist. And she hasn't shown any interest in having a Sister Souljah kind of moment. So I don't expect it from her. And I acknowledge, although I don't think it's the primary reason that she lost to Donald Trump, but I think that Kamala Harris has got to deal with the fact that we've yet to elect a female president and an African-American female president, obviously part of that mix. So racism, sexism, probably issues that she's going to have to deal with, which is fundamentally unfair, but a reality. My point is, I was in the category that said that Newsom is more likely to be elected president than Kamala Harris, and 95%. I was surprised by that. I would have said, I don't know, 65, 70% would say that it's Newsom. By the way, on the same subject of Vice President Harris, there's an interesting story out there today getting a lot of attention. Jonathan Karl from ABC News has a book called Retribution about Donald Trump's return to power, and today is the release date. And in it comes the anecdote that President Obama was very upset with Speaker Pelosi because if you accept this account, and I do, if you accept this account, Pelosi and Obama had concerns over Harris's abilities as a candidate. And they wanted to have something you heard from me, a competitive primary, a blitz primary. So what ends up happening is President Biden gets out of the race, and very quickly he endorses Harris. And once he endorses Harris, Pelosi does likewise. And according to this account, President Obama was not happy with Pelosi's quick endorsement. According to the account, the source who told Jonathan Karl, the person summed up Obama's message to Pelosi as essentially, "What the F did you just do?" Obama was disappointed because once Pelosi folded her tent, he knew, okay, it's going to be Kamala Harris. And I argued at the time it was not to Harris's advantage. She would have been better served competing for it. I'm not sure that anyone else, if they knew she was getting in with Biden's support, would have competed. Would Josh Shapiro have competed with Kamala Harris? Would Gavin Newsom have competed with Kamala Harris? Maybe not. But I think it would have been, as I said at the time, in Harris's best interest and in the nation's best interest. But that's not the way that it went. Instead, we had a coronation. In fact, one of the Smerconish cartoons, not only in the book, but in my conference room here in studio, is one of those that shows Vice President Harris with a robe, a cape, and a crown with the whole coronation mindset. That was one that I wanted to be a keeper. So speaking of elections, one other thing, if I can just show you for my friends on YouTube, if you're listening to the podcast and not watching on YouTube, remember, every day you can watch on my YouTube channel. I got snookered. I had to buy the New York Post today at Wawa because the New York City mayoral race 1 week from today comes to a close. And I needed to see, it cost me $3 for this little peek just to see how far is the Post going to try and undermine Zohran Mamdani. And the answer is they're going to great lengths. I mean, on the front cover, it says 1 week to save New York. They have photographs of Mamdani and Cuomo, not even Sliwa, because they just want to, ignore the fact that Curtis Sliwa is still in the race. And then the subheadings: every vote counts to stop a socialist takeover. Cuomo cuts Mamdani's lead in polls. Zohran lies about his 9/11 aunt. You read a headline like that, like he lied about his 9/11 aunt, and you think, oh my God, was she the 20th hijacker? No, I'll tell you what that story is. And then inside, big story about how the lead that Mamdani has been cut in half in the last month. Now he's got a 10-point lead. It had been 20. Small sample size, I note, 500 people in the Suffolk poll. But look, a race like this is a hard race to poll. I acknowledge that. And having been in a few of these, I've learned those lessons. In fact, I just had a conversation with Larry Kane. About the old controversy surrounding Wilson Good and Frank Rizzo and a pollster named Steve Teichner. We were both reliving that memory. Too long for me to tell you right now. So then there's an editorial: vote to stop Mamageddon, as in Zohran Mamdani, Mamageddon. He's going to crater the tax base. Curtis Sliwa is a wasted pick. Quote, we understand why many of our readers prefer Curtis Sliwa, but a vote for him is not a vote to stop Mamdani. The grim fact is that at this point, Cuomo is the only candidate who can. We know it's hard for many New Yorkers to get behind Cuomo, given his own disappointing record, but Mamdani is a virtual existential threat. And then 2 full pages of just like random, New York City folks, why we can't have Zohran Mamdani. I mean, if you had to pay for this advertising, it would cost you a fortune. He wants to turn the city into a college town. I know socialism fails because my family fled it. Where's the money going to come from? His views would be comical if they weren't so scary. These are all blurbs, anecdotes from some voters. And then Bill Bratton writes a column, the former New York police commissioner, saying that even with a great NYPD commissioner, Jessica Tisch, by the way, why can't she run for mayor? It's not going to be enough, because if Mamdani is, pro-criminal, even having a great police superintendent, I'm kind of chuckling just at the extent to which they're going. I'm not chuckling because I'm a fan of Zohran Mamdani. Two more. Sorry, I didn't mean to get off on this tangent. But there was a rally over the weekend Governor Hochul was present with Zohran Mamdani, and people started chanting, "Tax the rich." And she gets asked about it, and her answer is to say, "I thought they were chanting, 'Let's go Bills.'" And then finally, the 9/11 aunt. The story here is that Zohran Mamdani has said that he has an aunt who was too afraid to wear her hijab on the subways after 9/11. And the Post, through their big investigation, says that's not his aunt. That's his dad's cousin. Like, oh, he made that up. Well, there is a woman, and he says aunt in his family is loosely used and described. Okay, anyway, sorry. Here is the Tuesday poll question. Should Congress mandate Medicaid to cover weight loss medications like GLP1’s? I can't wait to have this conversation on radio today. And I will be joined on radio by an economist from Brown, whose name is Emily Oster. And she says we ought to make Ozempic available to everybody because it's going to save lives. And yes, it'll be costly, but not as costly as people think. Or, as I say, we can take care of you now, or we're surely going to be taking care of you later. And I think she makes a compelling argument. I think that in many people's minds, this comes down to whether you see obesity as a chronic disease, which I do, or do you see it as, it's a behavioral problem? Exercise. And there are some Maha undertones in all of this because Secretary Kennedy's attitude is one of discouraging the accessibility of the GLP-1s because he believes then people aren't going to diet and exercise. From Emily Oster's piece in The Atlantic, which has, of course, run in the newsletter, an estimated 100 million adult Americans, more than 40% of the population, are classified as obese. This is a massive health crisis that will claim many lives over the next decades. As is well known, drugs now exist that can dramatically reduce obesity and its related health risks, but most of the roughly 37 million adult Americans on Medicaid, an estimated 14 million of whom suffer from obesity, do not have access to these drugs known as GLP-1s, and the reason is simple. The medications are hugely expensive, and the cost of covering them could seriously stretch state budgets in the short term. America ought to do it anyway. And then she goes on to talk about life expectancy being shorter for those with obesity. She discusses how GLP-1s are much more likely to succeed at scale. As of last year, an estimated 15 million adults taking these meds. The millions of eligible adults on Medicaid are mostly not covered, and this population cannot afford to pay out of pocket. The primary objection is cost. She acknowledges this. If every adult on Medicaid with obesity took up the medications, it would cost an estimated $143 billion a year. This is an enormous increase, and worries about it are why Congress has not required states to cover the drugs. And that's the question I'm asking. Should Congress require the states to cover the drugs? Michael, $143 billion? How the hell could we afford that? Okay, hang on. First of all, she notes that if the medications were useless or the problem was small, we wouldn't worry about the cost. The fact that so many people will want these drugs and so many doctors are eager to prescribe them is both an argument for making them available and a reason not to do so. But Dr. Oster goes on to explain that she believes that the budgetary costs are overstated. First, some of the costs of these medications are going to be recouped in overall lower healthcare spending. That's my argument. And I'm not the economist from Brown, she is, but my argument is you've got somebody who's obese today, right? Morbidly obese today. And you're not going to give them Ozempic because you say, oh, that costs too much. Okay, what's going to happen to that person? And who will ultimately pay for their health care? Like, you can pay me now or you can pay me later. That has always been my argument about this. And then she goes on to say, The calculations assume that Medicaid would pay something similar to the current cost of private insurers. However, Medicaid generally pays far less for drugs than do private insurance companies, 53% after rebates. She also said that as these drugs become more plentiful, they're going to fall in price over time. And already the calculations that assume $700 to $800 a month, when Costco has just announced it's going to sell them for $4.99 a month. One last paragraph. With a baseline non-Medicaid cost of $499 a month and an expected 53% discount, the expected cost would be $235 a month. If 10% of the eligible Medicaid population took these drugs for obesity, that would mean an annual cost of $3.9 billion, which is just 0.4% increase in Medicaid spending. The calculation also ignores the cost savings of lowering obesity, as noted above, may be in the range of $750 per person annually. I would think it would be much more than that. So if indeed the cost of the GLP1s could be $235 a month, who could argue we shouldn't do that? Not me. I think that we should. I think we ought to mandate the Medicaid coverage because obesity is a chronic disease. I don't think it's a personal failing. If you disagree with me on that, then you can vote otherwise on the poll. I think that the long-term savings could outweigh the short-term cost. I also do see it as an equity issue that people on Medicaid generally have higher obesity rates but less access to treatment. And I think it'll help reduce the stigma and expand the toolbox of dealing with those who are chronically overweight. The only argument against it, and I'm not discounting it entirely, it's a big one, is cost. If you're paying $1,000 to $1,300 per month, I get it, we can't afford it. But if you accept Emily Oster's argument that the price is coming down, then I don't know how we don't do it. So it's a great poll question, and I'm excited to see how it turns out. Go to Smerconish.com and cast your ballot. Should Congress mandate Medicaid to cover weight loss medications like GLP1s? You might want to stick around for the third hour of today's radio program and listen to what my guest has to say before casting your ballot. But vote, okay? Set yourself up, please, for notifications and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Episode 6 of the Mingle Project in production, as we say, right now. And I'm really, really excited about it. We're telling a story piece by piece about societal disconnect and the need to reestablish common experience. That's what the Mingle Project is all about. Okay? Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.